Now called to order. It's December 3rd, 2019, 6:01 p.m. We have a quorum. This is the rezoning hearing, 2019-ZON-111. You could read the property. 10410 East 52nd Street, BGP Development LTD and Metropolitan School District of Lawrence Township. Petitioners will be represented by Joseph Caldron. It's the rezoning of 57.63 acres from the DA district to the CS district to provide for the expansion of an industrial park and school-related use. All who intend to testify or believe that they may testify should stand and be sworn in by the clerk.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Be seated.
The petitioner could please step forward to state his or her case.
Thank you, and good evening, council members, President Chavez. It's our pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Joe Caldron. I'm an attorney with offices at 11 South Meridian. I represent both co-petitioners, the MSD of Lawrence Township, as well as BGP Development. Just to clarify, do we have a half hour to present tonight? I know that the normal rules are 15 and want to adjust accordingly.
So you asked for an enlargement of
I
time
would ask for an enlargement for a half hour.
Yeah, so you requested that prior to this evening.
Yes.
And I will grant that.
Thank you. Most appreciated. So one of the things that I often do as we get into the end of the year and holiday season, it's a great time of reflection. We think about things that we have done during the year, things that we've accomplished, goals that we've met, goals that we haven't met. We also look forward to the promise of the new year and the promise of new goals and new accomplishments. Now, that probably doesn't sound much like a zoning introduction to you, but in my mind, particularly with this case, it does. And I think that when we presented to you way back in February, that we brought you a proposal that we were proud of, but following your decisions last winter, we really needed to do a little introspection and needed to listen to what you had to say in your comments and, in fact, what the neighbors had to say. And in doing so, we believe that the proposal that we're bringing to you tonight has much more detail, much improvement based on what we heard last time, and is a project that benefits this city by accomplishing two things. It allows an existing Lawrence business to expand in a natural way, and it allows your own school district to expand within city boundaries. There's two petitioners. Each of them are part of the same rezoning. It's a plan development that is what we call CS, and that is designed to accommodate different types of uses, typically within a larger acreage amount, and it benefits the planning department as well as the city by providing sufficient details in terms of exactly what we're asking to do and exactly how it's going to be laid out. So we hope that in so doing that this petition makes sense for you this evening. Each of you should have a hard copy of the PowerPoint that's displaying on the monitor or on the screen, as well as a supplementary exhibit book, because some of the slides tend to be small. So again, the request is to rezone 57 acres from DA which is dwelling agricultural, basically the default for no zoning in Indianapolis, to CS. 30 of those acres would be developed by the school district for a transportation facility. 17 acres would be used to expand the existing business park to the south. In particular, and Ameribridge does have a representative here tonight, they are poised to expand, and without rezoning, they can't expand to the south. This is a photograph with a number of key property owners and businesses identified. You can see the existing business park. Poindexter Excavating has been the anchor, and BGP is affiliated with Poindexter Excavating. This business park currently extends over to the west and south to where Poindexter Drive stubs. Ameribridge is located there. This is the BGP parcel that proposes the expansion. The school district parcel would run to the south of that and then over. You can see some of the other property owners identified, Crickmore and Francis. Those folks have been here before. Man Properties, who has expressed support of this project, is developing to the south. The Traditions neighborhood immediately to the west, and then a number of businesses across 56th Street, Crew Car Wash, Aldi, White Castle, Walmart. Winfield neighborhood is across 56th Street, about a half mile away from the development activity. As I mentioned, the existing zoning, DA, is dwelling agriculture. It allows for 3-acre lots. We think that this is not a realistic zoning classification, particularly since this property is located within a TIF district and is located adjacent to a business park. So all that could be done here today is 3-acre home sites or agricultural or some combination. It's not a very productive use of property. This is kind of the zoning map indicating some of the zoning classifications. You can see the existing business park is I-3 industrial to the north, I-1 to the northwest, and then you have a variety of special uses, SU-1 for Cornerstone Baptist, SU-2 for Indian Creek, DA, again, the default that affects the current property, and D-5-2 for Traditions. So you can see there's already a variety of commercial and industrial zoning to the north of the property, as well as residential to the east and to the south. We're not intending on disrupting those development patterns other than to expand and use the subject property. So commercial plan development allows for more certainty. There is a detailed site plan found in your exhibit book under tab 3. You can fold it out, 11 by 17. You can kind of get an idea of how this property would be developed, including setbacks. The CS development statement provides the details. This is all public record and in your folder, in your exhibit book under tab 4. The CS development statement allows for limited light industrial uses on the BGP parcel that matches or is in fact less intense than what's on the east side of Poindexter Drive. It allows for school uses and then limited C1 office type uses. Development standards are critical. We have provided a minimum 200-foot setback off 52nd Street and from the east property line, 60-foot minimum setback from the west property line. We're providing an 8-foot berm on the east and west lines and a 4-foot berm on 52nd Street. All of these development standards far exceed what the CS playbook is. So we're providing extra berming, extra height in that, extra landscaping, and extra setbacks. This was a significant change from last time. We've also included commitments that relate to hours of operation, how traffic flow is going to be. We have commitments that you can find in tab 5. If there are other commitments that the council would suggest tonight, we'd love to hear them. These have been on file. And we have plans of operation for both the school district and Ameribridge found in tab 7 and 8. One of the things that I think is important is to stress the positive fiscal impact of this proposed development. Right now, because it's farm ground, the total assessed value for 57 acres is $62,700. It generates $1,250 a year. Commercial land is now assessed at $5 per square foot. So, going through this rezoning, you would increase the land value alone to $3.8 million, not including improvements. We know that Ameribridge is contemplating a significant improvement of at least 15 to 20,000 square feet. So there would be improvement value added as well. The existing school district parcel on Thunderbird Road would also come back on the tax rolls, and that is also $5 a square foot. So there would be significant economic benefits from a city fiscal standpoint if this rezoning goes through and the property is developed as proposed. What we've done since last winter, we came to you in two separate cases. We were seeking SU2, which is a school zoning, and then BGP was seeking I-1 and I-3. Here, under the CS, you have a much more detailed development statement. You have a detailed site plan that is improved upon last winter's. We've shifted away from that east property owner a bit and provided significant setback. We have commitments, we have plans of operation, and most importantly, we had a traffic study done. We got an awful lot from you as a council and from the neighbors about concerns about traffic. It's always a legitimate issue, and we had a traffic study done late last spring to talk about and to study key intersections, 56, 52nd, German Church, Pendleton Pike, Midhofer, coming in and out of the development. And that traffic study concluded that all of the studied intersections that would be impacted by this development would operate at an acceptable level of service. Now, you can find the executive summary of the traffic study in tab 8 of your exhibit book. The study, the engineers suggested that there be some timing changes to some of the signals, but other than that, no other improvements were really needed to any of the streets or intersections. Keep in mind that as part of our obligation for 52nd Street, I should say, is that we would build on the north half exactly what the thoroughfare plan suggests, and that includes dedication of right-of-way. It's 52nd Street is to be a 2-lane primary collector with the lane widths, the sidewalk, the landscape buffer to match the thoroughfare plan. So we will do our share, and I know that Mann Properties is going to be developing to the south, so you would have a pretty good chunk of 52nd Street improved in the near future. In talking with the traffic engineer today, there were no passing blisters required or passing lanes or dedicated left turn lanes required for this project, primarily because the bus traffic really is what we call off-peak. They're there in the morning before peak rush hour, they come back after peak rush hour, they're out before evening peak rush hour, and back before as well. So the study is done with ITE standards, which is the nationally recognized traffic engineering modeling. Here's just the site plan, which is again found in your exhibit book as well. You can see the attention we've paid to our berming. This is part of the record. This is how we have to develop. Elevations of the proposed transportation center building, trying to provide some roof pitch, some good building materials. This would be kind of the maintenance garage scenario. kind of a berming rendering coming off 56th Street or 52nd Street. We know we still have detractors out there. We understand that they may talk about traffic. Keep in mind that anecdotal experiences are not the same as traffic studies. We all encounter a crash or something that's happened that causes us extraordinary frustration. But that does not mean that the traffic issues are bad in this area. All the intersections currently and will operate at acceptable levels. Incompatibility of uses, this industrial park started more than 30 years ago before the residential development. Everything's grown together side by side during that period of time. As far as comments about unsightly conditions, we have specific development statement and commitments addressing those. So you're not going to allow a runaway train with this proposal. This kind of takes you through a timeline where you can see BGP in '86. You can see it expanding. You can see the traditions. You can see Winfield coming in. All of this stuff came after the industrial park, so it's not incompatible. We understand staff has to protect its comprehensive plan. We do not see residential development as either being smart or realistic. You would not want Poindexter Drive to have commingled traffic between residential traffic and commercial traffic. It's certainly not appropriate for a TIF. The staff report talks a lot about the existing residential to the east and south, but as shown, there's plenty of industrial and commercial zoning to the north. The traffic study talks about certain individual movements in the staff report, but the ITE standards talk about overall level of intersection services. Yes, there are a couple of movements, turns left that don't have proper queuing that are tough, but those are not deteriorating because of this proposal. This is a view of Poindexter Drive coming in off 56th Street, so you can see exactly what's taking place from that 56th Street view. The school district is committed to the city of Lawrence. Ameribridge is committed and wants to stay and expand in the city of Lawrence. Relocating the transportation is more efficient. It's a safer proposition than what exists today. Expansion of the industrial park adds tax base, creates jobs, retains jobs, and supports local businesses that are around. It's impractical to think that the subject property can be developed for residential purposes. We don't think vacant ground's better. We don't think residential development is smart or better. And finally, the traffic study concluded that all the impacted intersections will operate at acceptable level of service. At this time, I'd like to have Dr. Sean Smith from the school district speak for a moment or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Madam President and members of the Common Council, I bring you greetings this evening as superintendent. But before I start, I would like to introduce your sister organization, the Metropolitan School District of Lawrence Township Board of Education. I have all the board members in the audience. So if I could have Mr. McGregor to please stand, our board president, our board vice president, Mr. Richard Freege is here, secretary, Ms. Wendy Mustin, board member Carol Helmus, and board member Sean Denny are here. As you well know, we have a long history as a city and school corporation. We simply work together, simultaneously together beside each other. But in 1992, we built a transportation facility to serve the school corporation. And at that time, that facility was perfectly fine until the growth happened. And so about 5 years ago, the school corporation had to spend some time studying its facilities. We called it our Blue Ribbon Facility Plan. The Board of Education commissioned me to study our facility because we realized that our transportation facility could not accommodate the current buses that we have. Our community, and this is something we all need to be proud of in the audience, has simply grown. And it has impacted our main artery of our school district, logistically our transportation facility. The Board of Education has approved, and we have $10 million to invest in a new transportation facility to assure our 16,150 students can be transported daily in all the activities that we participate in. We have 2,500 employees in our school corporation. The lifeline of our school corporation, the main artery as we call it, is our transportation facility. It is our start and is our finish every single day. We employ 250 people that are in that facility. We are committed to the city of Lawrence. I want to thank the mayor and his team because over those 4 years, we have worked very closely with the city on planning and looking for facilities that will keep us in the city of Lawrence. Mr. Poindexter, who stepped forward to give us the opportunity to purchase his property, has been a great citizen for us and allowing us to purchase the property. So long-term, we're committed to the land and would take care of this facility as we are one of the largest landowners in the city of Lawrence and the township. We will make sure that the property will be well-maintained as well as our students. So Common Council members, and I will conclude with this and simply say that over the past years, it's been a privilege working with the city. We are a very attractive city. We know that by the number of students that we have in our school corporation. We've experienced significant growth over the last 6 years. We've grown by 1,300 students over the last 6 years. And so we want to continue to maintain a very attractive school corporation. As our theme is great city, great schools, which is a very powerful theme, we like to continue that and just thank you for considering our proposal. Thank you.
Like to have Mayor Collier step up if he would for a moment or two.
As Dr. Smith indicated, we have developed a very solid partnership between the City of Lawrence and Metropolitan School District of Lawrence Township. And I have witnessed personally over the years the growth at a time when many school districts are collapsing. We're growing every year. I believe we were the second fastest growing school district over the last 4 or 5 years in the state of Indiana. That brings with it its accompanying problems, and most of them are good. And that is, as the school begins to grow and all of our schools begin to grow, the need is there for additional property, additional space. As you know, we just got through having a referendum passed that I supported completely by a rather wide margin. I think it was 65-35 was the actual vote that took place to allow for increased funding for our 2 high schools. This bus depot that we're talking about tonight is what's part of the project, something that we have been talking about actually since January of 2016, finding a place for them to be. There's no question that they're operating now in a bus depot that does not fit the needs of the school district and will not. It has got to the point now where we're parking about a third too many buses in the existing depot they have now. Finding space was tough in a city that is becoming increasingly built out. As Dr. Smith indicated, Billy Poindexter has been a city partner for over 50 years. It was he who stepped up to offer his land for this possibility. So I have to commend his willingness to work, and of course Joe Calderon's willing to work in trying to get this project done. It's incredibly important to the city of Lawrence to keep Lawrence Township schools in our city. So I want to express my full support for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Goodroad from Traditions Neighborhood.
Thank you. My wife and I have been a resident of the Traditions for 19 years. I do have, I'm in favor of this proposal. I don't speak for all of the residents of the Traditions neighborhood, but I've spoken with a few of my neighbors, and they're either for it or they don't really. They're ambivalent. They don't have a position one way or another. I've read a few of the things on the remonstrance, and I want to address a couple of those. One of them is environmental damage, a concern over environmental damage from the watershed. I do believe there's 250 buses that are proposed for that, but we have thousands of cars in our neighborhoods, and I believe the propensity for environmental damage from them is just as great as 250 buses over there. I think that the commitments that Poindexter is going to make I personally like what they've done. I was here for the previous meeting. I think that they will, as I look throughout the city and I see mixtures of commercial, residential, industrial, this isn't the only one. It's all around the city. And there are good and bad examples of that. And I think what Mr. Poindexter and his people have proposed can be a good example. And I'm satisfied with the commitments that they have proposed. Property values, there's a concern over possibly lowering of property values. I don't see that that's an issue personally, but I don't have any facts or figures. Certainly, the worst thing that happened to us was the mortgage bust, not a proposal for a rezoning. I'm concerned about fair usage of land for Mr. Poindexter, but for anybody who owns land around there. And I think that Mr. Poindexter has bent over backwards trying to find a way to appease those who have concerns and come up with something that will work. I am concerned about the traffic along 52nd at our Traditions entrance and exit. There's two concerns. It's pretty fast. It's 40 miles per hour right now, and people will do 50 along there. And the problem with that is there's a rise in elevation from westbound traffic, to where when you're coming out of the Traditions, I've witnessed personally, because I live right along 52nd within Traditions, many near accidents because the traffic is so fast, and that elevation, you can't see them coming. It's for me and my concern, I think the bus traffic is actually going to help that somewhat because it will limit.
Excuse me, one moment.
Yes.
We're going to keep order. We're going to be respectful of each other and of everyone's time. So I would please appreciate if there's no laughing or side comments that are made. We need to be respectful of everyone. I'm going to request that they do the same thing when you come up and speak. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I have one last thing that I want to talk about on that, though, and that is the intersection of 52nd and Mithofer. And again, it's from personal, I know it's anecdotal, but it's personal observation. The buses are so long that I think we need some kind of a setback marking for buses that are going to make left turns onto Mithofer, because there's a big telephone pole right there. In order for them to clear that intersection, I've had to see people back their cars up in order for the buses to get around that. Thank you.
Sir, could I have your last name again, please?
Good road?
Good Road? Okay.
Yes, just like it sounds.
And finally, Tracy Yates from the Lawrence Chamber.
Trace Yates, you have 2 minutes.
I'll go quick. Good evening, Madam President, councilors. Happy holiday seasons to you all. I'm Trace Yates, president of the Greater Lawrence Chamber. My comments will be brief this evening. I'm here as an advocate representing the Chamber for this proposed project, as the Chamber feels this is in the best interest of our business community and our community as a whole. The parties here tonight represent a wonderful community partner in MSD Lawrence Township and 2 local homegrown businesses who need our help to expand and to stay in the city of Lawrence. MSD buses operate here already. They share our roads here already. They share our traffic lights here already. And most importantly, they serve our kids here each day, providing safe, dependable transportation to school. And as I understand it, the proposed project is about a half-mile away from where it sits today. So this isn't like a new enterprise entering our community. It exists here today. And Mr. Poindexter is well known in this community, a business born and bred here in Lawrence, a wonderful philanthropic support throughout this community. Ameribridge and Mr. Sloan, perhaps, is a lesser known, born and bred business success story here in Lawrence. As I understand the story, this business began in the mid-1980s, and Mr. Sloan shared with me what the first year revenues look like, and what revenue today looks like, which I will not disclose. Perhaps if they are so inclined to do that with council, I'll leave that to them. But suffice to say, this is now a multi-million-dollar business that employs 70-plus employees here in this community. Now, what I'd also know is that this business has an urgent problem. They must expand to keep pace with their business production, to fill orders in hand, or relocate somewhere else in central Indiana. They must either stay or go. They have to decide one or the other. Now, I also know, Mr. Sloan told me, that this business wants to stay here in Lawrence. And our economy, no question, needs to expand and not contract. I would also respectfully suggest that, as this council knows, our tax base also needs to expand and not contract. So businesses don't want to see other businesses leave, again, representing the chamber. Sizable businesses get a little nervous when they see other sizable businesses leave. It's bad for business. And I would simply suggest that this multi-million-dollar tax-paying organization, if they would leave this community, that represents a fairly significant gap, right? So I come from the business world, from large publicly traded organizations, and when we would look at the sales projection or the operating statement, and we projected a gap, shareholders want to know, what's your plan to fill the gap? So if a business like Ameribridge, this multi-million-dollar business, leaves, that's a pretty significant gap that would need to be filled. Now, a couple of closing comments. Please understand, to my fellow citizens, the Chamber's position is not a business first, citizen second point of view. On the contrary, I'm also a citizen of the city of Lawrence, and I can certainly understand residential concerns or any concerns about health or safety or traffic counts, et cetera, et cetera. I think some of the work suggested earlier from council finds workable solutions to that. And I would simply respectfully suggest that we work together, find a workable, equitable solution that serves not only our fellow citizens, not only our kids, and we also find a way to keep these local born and bred businesses here in Lawrence. Thank you.
And thank you, counselors. We're happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions for counselors for the petitioner?
Madam President, I got a question. I'm looking at the transportation study impact. I'm looking at this here on the second page.
Okay.
And the three biggest areas I noticed as I drove tonight, and I'm looking at the post PM routes, which is 4:30 to 5:30 PM. It looks like on here the grade is from A to D, if I read that correctly, D being the worst.
D is not the worst in the traffic study jargon. It is
Okay.
A through F.
Okay.
Levels of service are acceptable, A through D, and sometimes E.
So what would be the difference between a D and a F? Could you explain that?
A D and an F would be a measurement of the length of time to move through an intersection. So it's done in terms of overall number of seconds. And I can't tell you how many additional seconds it would take to go from D to F, but it would be something that ITE standards say makes it an intersection that just doesn't, it's just going to create more and more backups because you're not pushing enough through.
Okay, so when I look at this at 56th and Pillen Pike, it has a D and then 54.5. Does that mean it's 54 seconds longer? Is that what that number means?
No, that is the total amount of time at the intersection to push through, not longer than current.
So you're saying if you're at 52nd and Pillen Pike between 4:30 and 5:30, you'd be there approximately 54 seconds?
Correct, based on this study. You would be there 44.6 seconds existing and 54.5 post-development, both within the D category. It remains acceptable.
Oh, so I see what you're saying now. So it's only 10 seconds different.
Correct.
With the buses.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other counselors? Counselor Hall?
So I've sat through two of these meetings, and one was for the, basically, there's two parcels that were combined for this vote tonight.
Correct.
Why were those two combined?
Why?
Yes.
Well, two things, I think. One, the school district really can't do what it needs to do without the other, because Poindexter Drive is a stub street, and it needs to be going through commercial land, if you will, in order for the school district. Secondly, we brought them separately before because Mr. Poindexter's situation was not yet firmed. In other words, he didn't know where Marybridge was back last February, nor did he have another tenant. That came later. So when it's all said and done, after listening to all the comments from the neighbors and from the counselors, we felt, and I've done this in a number of cases where I've got maybe different uses that will be sharing some infrastructure, such as this case, and might have some commonality in terms of what it needs to do to protect neighbors, such as a consistent berm around the perimeter. It just made sense to me to do a CS and have a planned development where we're laying it all out on the line. We're telling you exactly what our setbacks are, exactly what our berming is. We're not defaulting to the zoning ordinance. We're creating our own district. We're planning our uses. We're limiting them per the CS statement versus having kind of a blanket industrial type thing. So this provides more clarity and certainty, and we felt that because of the shared infrastructure and really the need to kind of protect the whole area from the entire property and not just two different segments, that it was appropriate to do it this way.
So if I don't agree with one of the proposals, then I have to vote no to both proposals.
Well, it's one proposal,
Right. So, but it's two businesses.
but in the zoning world, we're asking you to change the map for 57 acres from DA to CS. It's DA doesn't do anybody anything. It's the same for both. So we're just proposing to do a map change. Within the CS, you are correct. There are different uses within it that pertain to different portions of the property, because that's the way the property is planned to be developed.
So on your concept development plan, I see the berming, I see the bus spaces and the parking lots and the gates, the detention pond, the fencing. I see all of that for the bus depot.
Right.
I don't see anything for the other parcel to the north.
Well, we don't have that in terms of building layout. Yesterday, I received kind of a sketch from a Marybridge representative, Gary Sloan. It was not provided in time, and it's not even fully approved yet. It's just a sketch of a potential building to go south of their existing facility. So what we did, knowing that, Mr. Hall, when we filed, we put in kind of the parameters for where any building could fit on these properties with minimum setbacks, maximum setbacks. It has to fit within the parameters in order to go within the development. So it's not that you're approving something that you can't figure out in reading this. This document would be for permitting purposes. If a Marybridge proposed, say, a 20,000 square foot building, it would have to come in with its own plan and show that it matches what's put in writing here in the narrative.
I heard a lot of stuff, but I still don't. It seems like you've tacked Ameribridge's fate to this. So I heard what you said. My second question is the traffic study.
Yes.
So my initial concern on the traffic was along 52nd Street,
Correct.
not the intersections. I mean, I understand the intersections, and when I looked forward to seeing the traffic study, I saw the intersections. I did not see anything about turning the turn lane into off of 52nd Street. I didn't see anything about how many buses will be turning in and how much traffic will be blocked. How much does the road need to be widened or curbed to access the traffic that we're looking at that could possibly happen on 52nd Street? I'm also not just concerned with the buses, but I'm also concerned with future residential that goes in around there that will further increase the traffic. So the traffic study, in my mind, did not address the concerns I had.
May I respond?
Yeah, please.
With respect to the entrances in and out of 52nd Street, there would be no need for either a dedicated left turn in, nor would there be a need for a passing blister. In fact, and that was per conversation with the traffic engineer that I had earlier today. The thoroughfare plan, which is fresh, calls for 52nd Street, and that's supposed to account for all future growth, that it remains a two-lane primary collector. It would be improved and look different than what it looks like today because of kind of the whole idea about having bike lanes and separate sidewalks and buffering between road pavement and ultimately sidewalk and then private property. That still contemplates only one lane going each way, and that plan was adopted just in October. So there would be no need for an expansion beyond the thoroughfare plan if the Metropolitan Development Commission approved it based on correct information, which I think you can assume they did.
So they approved it in October before we're ruling on a zoning issue. So they didn't have that ability to take that into their account.
Well, they would have information based on what could be expected to be developed down the road. So let's say, for example, that this property were to be developed residential, you'd have much more in and out trips coming on 52nd Street than you would with this. Most of the bus traffic's going to come in and out from the north. You will have employees come in mostly from 52nd Street based on the assigned trips and routing. And that's information that's in a 145-page version of the traffic study. So there would be, per the traffic engineer, no need for a dedicated left, no need for a passing blister. Now, as a council, you are in charge of the purse strings of your city, and in fact, you help manage through the mayor's office and your Department of Public Works. If you decided you wanted to do something different, you could, and you could ask us to do something like that. I don't think we're opposed to doing that if the council deemed that to be necessary. But our traffic engineer says it's not necessary. But if you as a counselor would like to suggest that we put something like that into a commitment in concert with working with your Department of Public Works, I don't think we have an issue. We don't want to be bad neighbors. We've tried to do the homework necessary for you to make an informed decision that what is proposed will not adversely impact your community, including its infrastructure.
So I'm going to give 5 more minutes, counselors, just to be respectful to the remonstrators that still have to come up. So are there any other counselors that have questions?
Madam President, I got some follow-up.
Yes, Counselor Jones.
In my previous notes, I had around 205 buses, and then tonight I heard 250. Is it,
I think you heard 250 from Mr. Goodroad, who's not representative of the
Okay.
school. I have Roger Smith from
you
the
have an exact amount?
MSD.
Currently, today, on-site, if we parked all the buses and our spares, we'd have 190 buses parked on-site. We have
I'm sorry, did you say 190 or 198?
190,
Okay.
190. We have 160 drivers. We have 40 monitors. We have 10 staff members. We have about 10 mechanics. And we have 144 daily routes twice a day.
Okay, and I don't know if this would go to you or to the attorney. On your buses leaving, on the routes, like I look on this traffic thing and I see the weakest point looks to be 52nd and Midhofer. And I drove that tonight, and actually last week I was there, and when a bus was coming south on Midhofer, turn on to 52nd Street, it could not make the turn without that car moving that was going westbound. So my question is, have you worked out a study or a bus plan on how many buses are going to be going east and west out of that, out of the proposed lot you're going to use?
We're using percentages right now, and about 80% are going to go north out of the lot onto 56th Street. We do have Winding Ridge areas, and we also have areas within 52nd that we're currently handling. So buses in those routes, of those routes in that area will continue to move in those areas. Right now, a lot of them come from the north. In this case, they'll be coming from the west, going from the east going to the west, and we'll be turning either left or right in that area to continue those routes. So based off the routes and the school that they're pertaining to, we're going to continue the route similar to what we're doing now. So we project over 80% would be out the north end of the property to 56th Street, going left or right, and then north or west.
Madam President,
Yes, Councilor Trevor.
this is more of a macro question, and it's probably for Mr. Calderon. Since we last met, and I did a little bit of research, there's not 57 acres available that was open for the school to look at. Is that correct?
The
This was
school
best
is
opportunity?
in another.
In the city of Lawrence.
In the city of Lawrence. No,
I'm
this
guessing the
is-
school board did a due diligence and through you, and
Yes.
you tried to find suitable land, and that wasn't open or available, and
You're exactly right, Mr.
Okay.
Chevrolet. This is really the only option based on all of its due diligence. It's
Thank
been a
you.
long time coming. Thank you.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, Councilor Wells.
Morning, gentlemen. I guess my question is under statement of commitments, under number 3, it says, except as described in a plan of operation or for construction activities or utilities, no commercial traffic shall access subject property from 52nd Street. If I look at plan of operation under bus routing, it says buses will be routed from the subject property to the north in order to access 56th Street, the south via 52nd Street. I think this was a big concern in the very beginning. And this is a concern particularly to me because I am the councilor that represents Winfield and Traditions neighborhoods. I've been on Pendleton Pike when the buses are coming and going, and traffic completely stops. And that's on Pendleton Pike, that's, and I sat there for a really long time. And I actually got there in line waiting for the buses to, gain access to because like they were coming back in the evening. We sat there for a really long time, and quite a few of them had already gotten onto the property. So my concern, I have two concerns, is especially the people in Traditions, they have one access in and out of that neighborhood. this is going to be, my understanding, the buses are going to be leaving, coming back, and then later in the day, it'll be leaving and coming back again. There also, you're going to have before and after, not only the buses leaving and coming back, you're going to have the people that are going to drive the buses leaving and coming back, and coming and leaving. To me, that's just I mean, if you're trying to exit or enter Winfield or Traditions, I just see a huge bottleneck. And as Mr. Goodroad had just mentioned, what is the plan if you're going to have all these buses that are, I would imagine, I mean, I don't know how many kids are to the east, but I would imagine there's going to be quite a few buses that are going to have to go to 52nd and Mid-Offer. How do they make that turn? I mean, the gentleman just said that he's seen that there was a bottleneck with them making a turn. My other concern is there's going to be a huge amount of blacktop, and there's also going to be a significant amount of building. And all that's going to be watershed, and we haven't even talked about that. Where's all this water going to go? I mean, I've looked at the area fairly close. I'm not a surveyor, but it looks to me that Traditions doesn't sit any higher than this property. What happens if we have a problem with the drainage and these people in that neighborhood end up, having flood issues? We have a lot of that in our city as it is.
I think your questions are excellent, and I certainly respect your position as the district counselor. Let me just do the drainage first, because I think that's easier. The drainage is planned to be routed kind of to the north and east. We have a detention facility as shown on our site plan, tab 3. All drainage has a separate permitting process. We have to drain according to the ordinance, so we have to accept whatever's coming onto our property now, and we can't discharge it any greater rate, any greater quantity than what we're doing now. In fact, we have to clean it before it goes off our plate, off our property. So it will meet all standards related to drainage. I think that's fairly easy, and we have a pretty good idea, although it's not been fully engineered, where that detention facility would go. So it's not going back towards your constituents' neighborhood, the Traditions. With respect to traffic, I would say two things. One, the bus traffic is what we call off-peak. So the vast majority of traffic, whether we like to admit it or not, for most of us happens between a certain hour, hour and a half in the morning, and again in the evening, typically 7 to 8, and then again 5 to 6 or whatever it might be. The bus traffic, by its very nature, is out before that, back after that, out before and back before. So you really aren't going to have a conflict in terms of the normal traffic patterns that you or I or anybody else might be experiencing in terms of getting to work. Yes, are there people that leave neighborhoods at 6 a.m.? Sure, but the vast majority don't. And you can't really plan for that kind of outside the norm contingency. So what we tried to do in the traffic study, and this was done by a third party, is have them look at it to make sure that this did work. And the conclusion is that it does at each of the intersections during the pre and post times that the buses would be operating. And the significant number of bus trips would be more to the north versus to the south. There already are buses on 52nd Street, on Mid-Offer, on German Church, on all these streets. So those aren't really going to change very much moving forward if this proposal is indeed passed.
Sir, I'm gonna stop you right there just momentarily. We're gonna move on, and we can always hold questions
Sure.
till the end to the remonstrators. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your time.
So remonstrators, if you step forward, when your name is called, state your name and your address for the record. I'd appreciate that.
Good evening. My name is Maria Rusamaroff. I live at 11754 Sinclair Drive, Indianapolis 46235. I am here on behalf of the remonstrators and in opposition to this DA to CS zoning, petition number 2019 ZON 111, located at 10410 East 52nd Street. I will not do a PowerPoint tonight. However, given the time constraints, I do have printed up some of those forms. I'd like to ask if I could present them as exhibits. And I also have 23 pages of petitioner signatures, also in opposition, that we would like to submit as exhibit. Thank you for allowing us to speak on behalf of this petition tonight. I hope that we can also request just a bit more time. We're not going to take a full hour or 30 minutes, but we might go into 20 if that's okay. We'll try to keep it tight. I understand we have a time constraint here. The folks in this room that are in opposition to this petition, I would like them all to stand if they might at this time, please, if that's okay with you.
You can be seated.
Thank you. As you can see, there are quite a few folks that are concerned about this petition. Many of the same folks were at prior meetings over the last year or so. I want to make it very clear that the Poindexter Industries, as well as Lawrence Township Schools, are not our enemy. We support them in every way. We just feel that this particular petition at this particular site for this type of use is inappropriate. That's all. And we just want to be sure that as a public hearing, we use our right in a democracy to have our statement of our opposition. Some of the things that were brought up by the council member tonight are the same sort of issues that I had when I reviewed this. In particular, the one thing I want you to keep in mind as we review this petition is keep in mind concentration and length. Concentration and length. Those are two important pieces to this petition. Of course, this petition provides for administrative school buildings, a school bus terminal, and the Emera Bridge connectors. The concerns that we have regarding this proposed rezoning and requested uses is, I'm going to split this into two separate areas, the industrial use portion and then the school bus terminal issues. All in all, in terms of the administrative school offices, most of the persons here tonight are not in opposition and could support that under certain circumstances. However, we are somewhat confused as to why an additional administrative building is required when we have one at Craig Middle School or the old Craig Middle School. Is that facility going to be closed? We'd like some of those questions answered. Those were not clear to us. So I'm going to go back and talk about the industrial uses. On the site plan and in a CS zoning, that Mr. Callaway can make clear for me if I make an error in this statement, but my understanding is a CS zoning, commercial special, has a higher level of requirement. It's a higher level of specialized zoning that has a specific site plan, specific landscape plan, and specific plan of operation, including uses. When I reviewed this petition, I was concerned because I could see under the area, and that's in a couple pages on page 4, the site plan that was submitted. It seems as though, as one of the counselors brought up earlier, that the Poindexter property has no information. We did not receive any of the documents they spoke of earlier tonight regarding the types of use. Is there a building that's going to be used? The only list that we have included uses that are not I-1 zoning. They are I-3 zoning. It seems as though they're packaging this again as an I-1 use wherein it is actually I-3 use. There is no facility that I can discern anywhere in this. There's no building. Are these operations to be conducted outdoor? Is this outdoor storage? It's somewhat confusing. So we would like to get some clarification on that. And so for some of those reasons, obviously, we are concerned that this type of use is not appropriate here. The second piece of that is when you look at the site plan, you'll notice that under the Poindexter property, that line is an I-1 zone. It's a hard line. The property zone to the south of that is DA. Yes, DA is a holder for most property that doesn't have a zoning classification yet or hasn't been developed, but there's no foreseeable reason why that DA property could not be zoned D4 as some of the surrounding properties and be developed as housing. And we'll talk more about that as we go through it. We're concerned that additional expansion of what is currently out there, which seems to be, in my opinion, almost a junkyard of storage of these connectors, or jetways as they are called. However, if there's a building to be built, if these items are to be placed as precious inventory, I would have no problem reviewing that and understanding that that's part of our being a good neighbor. But to store it out in the open and just have it deteriorate makes me suspect and wonder what is really going on here. We believe that that will reduce our property values, and that is not in keeping with the adopted land use plan that was just adopted December 2018. If you go to the third page, you'll see some of the permitted uses in the I-1 zoning. Heavy equipment sales, service, and repair. What does that mean? Warehousing, wholesaling, distribution. What does that mean? There's no building here. You cannot have outside storage or outside operations unless you have a percentage of the building. Where's the building? Please clarify some of those questions. The last thing, the C1 uses, for the most part, would be acceptable. I would maybe look at the funeral home with the side eye. The SU2 zoning, again, would be acceptable, except for the SU2 zoning that involves a bus terminal. The reason why we would believe that that does not fit and is not appropriate, this location, obviously, is because that, again, a bus terminal is an I-3 use. It is not an I-1 use. It is not a school use. And if you look at the site plan, they did submit a rather intricate and explainable site plan for the school uses. But again, the Poindexter property is non-existent and unclear, and I have a lot of questions about that. The next page concerns the plan of operation. Of course, the plan of operation for the school use and for the bus terminal is quite clear, a lot of information, and we do appreciate that. However, it leads me to wonder about some other questions that we'll get to in a moment. The next page involves the the items that are currently at that location, they are rusting, they are scattered. It appears to me, if someone asked me what this land use was, I would say this is obviously a junkyard, and I do not think the expansion of that type of use at that location going further south beyond into adjacent to the Traditions neighborhood and along 52nd Street and closer to the two neighbors that are to the east is appropriate. It's quite inappropriate. The aerial map also indicates what a great neighbor Poindexter has been. At the last variance hearing, we said that we were against the expansion of the Poindexter property for this type of use. However, we did say what is there is okay. Let that be. We understand you've been there for years. We have no objection to that. It's the expansion of what appears, in my opinion, to be a junkyard. So those are some of the reasons that we object to that expansion. The next area would be the school bus terminal. The reason why we do not support that is because we believe the traffic issues are going to increase on 52nd and 56th Street to such an extreme concentration of not just a 40-foot long bus. These are the numbers that I have received. 220 diesel buses, 40-foot long. That is a high concentration along 56th Street and 52nd Street, which are two-lane streets, and I do not believe are capable of handling the traffic. The second area is reduced quality of life. With that increased bus traffic, with safety issues, with increased particulate pollution and diesel engine, the noise, that will reduce the quality of life for all the neighbors, including myself, who is about a mile from this location. The environmental issues, just the noise itself. We did do a video of the buses as they were pulling out. It was very, very loud. And when you have a little newborn baby next to that sort of noise every single morning for 10 months of a year, that can be debilitating. The other thing, we had some issues with the environmental, including the diesel emissions. We received lots of information from the EPA, IDEM, HEC, and others that indicated petroleum-based products, diesel-based products, particulates can actually cause a film on your lungs. And when we have children completely adjacent to this type of use, we have concerns about that. The runoff into the environmental sensitive area is also a concern. Again, putting down more pavement, the heat island effect, that radiate heat back and forth without being captured into the ground as it is now. Currently, there is a housing demand. We have houses going up on the Far East Side everywhere, up and down Carroll Road. In fact, in my own neighborhood, we have houses being built minute by minute at 56th and Carroll, along Carroll Road. There is no reason that a housing developer wouldn't find this property quite acceptable. There are also other available sites. I found a site myself at 10308 East 46th Street, McMahon property for sale, and there's a photograph of that at the end of your packet. So I did a little math with some of the numbers that I received. The amount of buses indicated to traverse 56th Street. If you take 80% of 220 buses is 188 buses leaving along 56th Street, half in each direction, 94 buses, 40-foot long buses at an intersection divided into two lanes is 45 buses, 40-inch long buses at an intersection. The intersection at 56 and Pendleton Pike is a signal of 1.5 minutes. I've timed it. 45 buses divided by 2 lanes is 22 buses. It would take 8 signalizations in order for all of those buses to get through that intersection. That's just one intersection. Then if you go to the next page on German Church and 56th Street, as you're looking north, when you're going southbound, so when the buses are coming back from their initial routes, that intersection at 56 and Sunnyside or German Church narrows to 2 lanes. The second lane is a left turn lane with a sometimes arrow. But if you look at this page in this photograph, that lane narrows to a through and a right turn. So when those buses are returning, they're going to be stacking up that through and that right turn because obviously they'll be turning back into the terminal. Another intersection, 52nd and Midhofer, a 4-way stop. If you notice, from the aerial photography and the pictometry photography, that is off keel. It's off center. When you turn from 52nd and Midhofer, when you turn north onto Midhofer going west, that turn is off center. And even a car, as many of you have related this evening, has a difficult time turning. Just imagine a bus. So that certainly will not be preferenced for 20% of the traffic, which were the statistics I received. Then the last intersection, 56 and German Church Road. Again, as you're going westerly into Winding Ridge subdivision, there's not a signalized turn left arrow. There's only a lane. That's also a school zone, so 25 miles an hour. So you're going to have buses stacked up. Lastly, I would like to call your attention to the land use plan, which was adopted in December 2018, 1 year ago, which was developed by professional planners, residents, businesses, many of those folks. What is the site identified as? Suburban neighborhood. That means housing, some low-intensity C1 uses. Those types of uses would be appropriate. But this type of, I would argue, I3 use is inappropriate. And I think the planners, the professional planners would also agree with that sentiment. And the last page indicates the for sale signs on the property that is on 46th Street, which 46th Street has a roundabout, and the buses could get around that much better than doing a left turn. The last question regards questions. The questions about the industrial use. What is being proposed? What is the site plan required for a CS proposal? Are there any operations here? What are the operations? There's no site plan. It's hard to evaluate when you don't even know what's happening. Then secondly, the buses. What are the ages of the buses? What fuel type do they use? The type of diesel that you use makes a difference. The film that has to be cleaned off of buses each and every year, and I know that for a fact because I have a personal friend that works for the Warren Bus Service and has told me that they have to clean those each and every year. So all of those sort of things, the particulates, the pollution, the noise, all of those things are going to affect our quality of life and affect our neighborhoods. We are asking, are there any quality of life studies, and is there any studies of the devaluation of our properties? And I thank you for your time.
Next, we have Ms. Reinhardt. If you could please step forward and state your name and address for the record. And I'm going to have to keep everyone to about 2 minutes because we have a very long list here, and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak if they so choose.
I'm Joellen Reinhardt. I live at 10847 Tanbark, 46235 Winfield subdivision. There are several issues that we have, and I have a photo that I would like to share with all of you, if it's all right. Thank you. One of the issues that we've talked about are 144 buses. By the count of 190 total school buses, 80%, so 144 buses coming onto 56th Street 4 times a day. As you all know, 56th Street is a 2-lane road. one east, one west, and it's a main thoroughfare. It is a main access point. You're now going to block traffic for 144 school buses 4 times a day. In Winfield, we have 2 entrances, and Winfield is directly north of 56th Street. We are across from this proposed development. We have 2 entrances. The first, the easternmost, is at Grosbeak and 56th Street. We are directly across from Indian Creek Elementary School. That's a nightmare. The other entrance is at 56th and Sedgegrass, which is directly across the street from Marcy Drive. You're now proposing that that entrance is also going to be blocked 4 times a day. As it is now, traffic is horrendous. The joke is, if you plan on getting out, take a lunch or your breakfast, because you're going to be waiting. One of the issues that was just brought up is the diesel exhaust particulate contamination. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has a division in Chicago dedicated to controlling and protecting the environment against diesel engines. I've seen nothing presented that talks about the damage that can be done to the air, to the water, to the communities. The prevailing winds in Lawrence come from the west, blow to the east, or from the southwest and blow northeast, directly into Winfield. That's what the red arrow is. You also have to the east, you have a church school and you have a school, Indian Creek. And I know the kids at Indian Creek go outside and play. I hear them. What are you doing to them if this is approved? We have a much bigger picture here, and I really hope everyone looks at that. Everything we know the school needs more space for their buses. We know that. We're not against that, just not here. We know Mr. Poindexter's a great businessman. I mean, I've been here since 1970. I've watched him go from a few trucks and excavating to a major person. We're not against him. We are against the proposal putting school bus terminal in this acreage.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, if you could state your full name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Rita Brown, and I live at 11595 Winding Wood Drive, the villas at Winding Ridge. I'll make this quick because a little of what I was going to say has already been alluded to. We talk about possibility of 220 buses or slightly less, but we only think in terms of 220 buses. There's also that many bus drivers that come and go, and they're in and out and in and out. So that comes to an actual addition of approximately 1,700 additional vehicles per day that are on our streets. Also about the jetways, if these are rapid turnover, then we have these large oversized pieces of equipment that are going to be traversing our highways. If they're not rapid turnover, then they're going to be sitting there, and as Maria said, kind of stacking up and adding to the looks of a junkyard there. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have, I don't want to mispronounce this. Danita is the first name. Okay. You could state your name and address for the record.
Anita Crickmore. I'm at 10640 East 52nd Street. I will be living right next door to the proposed project. A lot of my concerns have already been addressed: fumes, traffic, noise, and I also have a fear of what comes next. I mean, he's rezoning this, but we don't have a clear picture of what else is going to come after the expansion of the Mare Bridge and the school. It is going to affect me going to work. I could typically get gridlocked in my driveway because that's my only way out, is 52nd Street. So this morning as I'm going to work, I did see a school bus that was coming on Midhofer, coming in the direction of going north, turning east, and it did take 2 lanes for this bus to be able to make that turn. So therefore, I mean, my concern there is, are we going to have to, back up to let all these buses make these turns? I mean, the street is pretty narrow in that area. Also, there's going to be an underground storage of fuel that hasn't been addressed. There's going to be a fuel station on the property. I don't know what that's going to do to my environment. I have a fear of all these fumes coming towards us. We live to the east, the wind blows that way. And also, the traffic of the employees will impact the rush hour traffic. And it will infect me because I have to be to work at 7:30. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calderon, I'm assuming you just signed in.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you are a resident of the city of Lawrence. Did you? Okay. Mr. Freegee? Okay. Carol Helmus? Okay, thank you. So let me go through these really quick. And then if you want to come forward, okay? I believe that some of these are school board members. So it's Dr. Sean Smith, Trace Yates, Sean Denning. You all conceding your time? Okay. Tim McDonald.
My name is Tim McDonald. I live at 11607 Winding Wood Drive. And I have a few observations and questions, sort of. So kind of hanging your hat on the traffic study. Acceptable levels for who? I don't think any of the people who did the study have to live with this. The traffic study doesn't take into account the 100-plus houses that are being built right now at 56th and Bogey Drive that will be using 56th Street, which is going to take 80% of the bus traffic. Off-peak, well, there's no mention of on the traffic study impact of public safety. 56th Street and 52nd Street are both narrow. So while they say there's no need for a blister pass lane or anything like that, well, 4 times a day, you're going to have a heavy load of traffic, and a police car might get through, but an ambulance or a fire truck, they're a little bit bigger. They need some room, and red lights and a siren don't levitate the traffic in front of you. They're going to get stuck. And public safety, you're talking about seconds being very important. So this is going to have a heavy impact on that 4 times a day. Early in the morning, off-peak, that's when a lot of carjackings happen. That's when a lot of heart attacks happen. And none of that's taken into consideration here. And the other question I had was someplace that said the Thunderbird property would go back on the tax rolls. Do they already have a buyer for it? Or is that just an assumption that it will be sold and somebody will buy it eventually and it will go back on the tax rolls? So that was it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Visual McGregor. Stephen Goodwood, you've already spoken, sir. You want to speak again?
No.
Okay.
Well, I do have one request, and I think that the traffic that you alluded to, Mr. Williams, if we have special traffic markings, and we actually had this problem before. Like I said, those buses have been having difficulty negotiating even without. So if we have special traffic markings, the big white with the stop that has the cars back further, and I just drew it out myself, that would alleviate, I think, the problem of the length of the buses and negotiating those intersections.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Daria, or Dara. Is that an N?
I think it was Dana.
Oh, Dana. You have a fancy N. Okay. Mr. Poindexter. Tim Andrews, or Kim Andrews? Okay. Oh, Wow. Dustin Sloan? Okay. Robert Ballard? Joyce Irvin?
Good evening. My name is Joyce Irvin. I live at 10626 Sedgegrass Drive in Winfield subdivision. I have lived in this subdivision for 22 years, and I want to speak about some things that I have experienced and my neighbors have experienced with the economic development of Lawrence Township and some things that have happened. In terms of quality of life, on this sheet here, it says commitments, and one of the commitments is limited hours of operation for BGP parcels, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Well, there is a strip mall in back of our subdivision that goes along Sedgegrass Drive, and they are also supposed to have limited hours of operation, but that does not speak about the hours that they are closing, nor does that speak to the hours where they have contracted out work to work on their building. And I'm speaking of 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning, when residents are being awakened by very loud noises. And I'm talking about noises loud enough to make your house vibrate. And I'm talking about commercial trash collection that comes at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 in the morning, and he lifts these huge dumpsters up and then drops them so the earth shakes as well as your house. I'm talking about noise pollution. I'm talking about crime. I'm talking about people that are stealing from Walmart and all the stores in the strip mall areas that have literally ran through my backyard, through my neighbor's backyard, kicked the fences out, and had cops in my backyard. I'm seriously talking about some serious quality of life issues, to the point where our HOA, which I am a part of, has had to have meetings with people and owners of the strip mall in past years. It has gotten extremely loud, and it has caused extreme issues with quality of life, mine in particular. And I cannot express that to you. I have been awakened. I have called the Lawrence Police Department, I don't know how many times over the last 5 to 7 years, because of noise pollution, because of people and things being in my yard that shouldn't be there from this strip mall. And the crime, okay? So again, the hours of operation, if a business closes at 11, the Lawrence Township and Indianapolis noise ordinance says no noise outside that is considered a nuisance. If I can hear it inside my house over my television, if it wakes me up out of my sleep, it is over and above the level of noise that it should be, and it should not be outside the hours before 7 a.m. and after 10 p.m. However, 2 and 3 a.m. is obviously outside those hours, and that's what our subdivision has been dealing with. Because those businesses might close, but those people that they contract to work on their building or work on their buses or they don't know what those violations are. They don't know the noise ordinance, and they're not being followed.
30 seconds, please, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. The value of our property, I'm very worried about that. We've had homes going up for sale left and right, and then they're leasing them out to management companies who are leasing them out, and our property values are going down. Indian Creek School is right across from our subdivision. They already have buses coming and going. Did they consider that as well? Thank you for your time.
Kristen Clove? Oh, okay, great. I think we made it through the list. Staff is here if you have comments, sir.
Thank you. I'm Larry Calloway from the City of Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development. This is I guess, the fourth petition on this property, or a portion of the property. The previous two rezonings came before you, one to SU2, one to the I3 district. Both were eventually withdrawn. There also was a variance of use petition for an I3 use that was before the Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals, and that was denied. This petition would sort of combine, I guess, the best of those petitions into one petition within a CS district. And I guess briefly, because some questions related to that or comments came up, the CS district is a district intended to provide flexibility for development. So the whole intent of the CS district is to allow for a combination of uses to be integrated on the site, and to provide for flexibility in what types of uses can be on certain parts of the site, or so you can have one section has this use, another section has this use, or all the sections are permitted to have other uses. And so in this particular case, they're asking to have the school district transportation facility, and then they're allowing some I1 uses. Now, with the I1 uses, they're also, and let me back up, I1 uses are industrial uses that are considered, I guess, the least inappropriate next to residential development. However, what they're doing here with the CS, and which is what the CS allows in terms of flexibility, is they're saying we're going to have I1 uses, but we're going to have sort of I3 kind of standards, in that we're allowing these I1 uses to have outdoor storage, which typically wouldn't be allowed in an I1 district. And so the CS district allows you to do that. So instead of rezoning to I3, which allows for outdoor storage, you're rezoning to CS, allowing for I1 uses, which are uses that they're trying to develop on this site, but instead of indoors, they want to have them outdoors. So you can have heavy equipment sales and service, commercial building contractors, and all that kind of stuff in I1, but it would all have to be indoors. So they've modified the petition in a way to say that you can have this outdoor storage, and so therefore you can have basically an I3 use in a CS. And I think that's where maybe some of the confusion was with as to what they were accomplishing here. And also, as was mentioned, the CS district is intended to be sort of a higher order district, in that you try to provide for more than the minimum. And so when you look at the development standards of the CS district, it actually only provides for very minimal standards. And so for like transitional yards, it may only require 15 feet along a residential lot line. And so when they're providing for 200 feet or 65 feet or whatever it may be, they're providing for something beyond what the ordinance would require of them. So that is something to consider, that is beyond what the district would require. Because many times when we're dealing with CS district, many petitions aren't going above and beyond. They're only asking, they only want to develop it with 15 feet. And actually we had one recently where they wanted to be less than the 15 feet next to residential. They wanted 10. And so those ones are clear examples of things the CS district is not intended to do. And so, so there are, I guess in what I'm saying, there are positive aspects of this petition, although we're still, as a staff, concerned overall in that, well, these are still heavy industrial uses that are going to be adjacent to residential. The plan doesn't recommend for them. So it's hard for us to justify, totally supporting it. But at the same time, you've got an industrial park that dead ends into the site, which was allowed to happen in 2003. So natural extension of that southward makes sense, but then you have to balance that with an existing residential subdivision that also has a stub unimproved that dead ends into this property and also is lacking the multiple entrances it should have for a 90 unit subdivision. And actually in a public safety sense, that's somewhat concerning that it almost would be helpful if somehow they could, with this petition, have some kind of emergency access out of that stub into the new cul-de-sac. So at least if there was some incident on 52nd Street that would prevent emergency access to the subdivision, they could get there another way. So anyway, and then also with this petition, as was indicated, they've submitted a traffic study which gets into level of service, which can be kind of confusing as to how that all works. But as was indicated, level of service A to D is considered acceptable, even though you kind of look at it and you go, well, D doesn't seem that acceptable, but by the standards that are used in the transportation study industry, that is considered acceptable. Only E and F are considered unacceptable. F is total failure, and you basically need to kind of start over. I mean, that's so bad. Now, the overall intersections are level of service D. There are certain turning movements and through movements that are inadequate, but some of them get better with the proposed development and the timing that's proposed. Again, that has to happen with coordination of other agencies, but some of them get worse. Some of them relate to lack of queuing in left turn lanes and things like that. And some, as many of you know, 56th Street has a very short left turn cycle going westbound or going, I guess, southbound, depending on the bike. And so the traffic study deals with those kind of issues and kind of, like I said, makes improvements, but also has some, increases some deficiencies. But again, overall, you're basically in the same boat. You've got, in some areas, acceptable, more than acceptable levels of service, and in others, it's barely marginal. So having that information is helpful. That's again, going above and beyond. They're not necessarily required to provide a traffic study. Even upon request, we can't make anybody submit a traffic study. So again, that's something above and beyond that council can consider as part of their due diligence. But in terms of our staff recommendation, when it came down to it, just looking at a plan that was recently adopted and considering the intensity of the use, we just couldn't support this request. But we do acknowledge that it's a difficult decision, and there are very many competing factors that play into this. And I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Madam President.
Councilor Wells?
Mr. Callaway, as you said previously, this property has been, had 4 different attempts, probably within the last year, I think?
Yes, they've all been yeah, well, the first one was filed in 2018, but yeah, it lasted until sometime this year.
Well, my question is kind of a twofold question. Has your department ever recommended approval of any of the proposals for this site?
No, we've had the same recommendation of denial for all four petitions. Yes.
Do you know if they have any of the requests have ever made it to Well, I guess that answers my question. None of them actually ever made it downtown, I take it then.
Well, they were scheduled, but they were withdrawn prior
Before they made
to actually being heard.
And my last question, if I may, whatever the outcome here tonight, this still will go downtown regardless, will it not?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's one of the things that I meant to mention, just as last night. This one would be scheduled for the December 18th, 2019 meeting of the Metropolitan Development Commission at 1 o'clock.
December the 18th?
December the 18th, 2019. It would be on the no appeals docket unless someone appealed it, and if it's appealed, then there'll be a full hearing on that date, unless it's
1 o'clock?
continued. 1 o'clock, yes.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Larry, you've been in front of us over the last 4 years several times, and appreciate your comments. You're always on it. But I have noticed, and I want to make sure this is clear to many of the folks here. Have you ever made a recommendation that was opposite of that master plan?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever made one in Lawrence?
Well, actually, the one last night was contrary to the plan. The plan recommended commercial development, and they were proposing industrial development. So that was contrary to the plan.
Thank you.
Any other counselors?
Madam President, Mr. Callaway, it was stated earlier that the parcel that we're talking about was not preferred for residential use, was not, I forget the exact word, but it wasn't, the petitioner didn't think that it was, the land could be used suitable for residential use. Does the city have an opinion on that? Because that's part of the master plan, that it is residential use.
Yeah. Well, clearly whoever worked on the plan decided that it was reasonable for residential use, which is what the suburban neighborhood classification basically addresses. It clearly doesn't address that industrial uses should be developed on this site. At the same time, it seems maybe a little short-sighted that it didn't acknowledge the fact there was a cul-de-sac or that there was a dead end of an industrial park leading into the site, and that there's somehow needed to be some look at how all these conflicting uses could be developed on this site, that there needed to be maybe well, what's done in a lot of places is you call a certain, you designate an area a critical area because there's these kind of conflicting issues, and you want to kind of address that in a more detailed manner and look at what other possibilities there might be to possibly accommodate some residential development that would allow them to have a second access or whatever to another road, but also allow for expansion of industrial or maybe commercial that might be more compatible, a more lower intensity industrial or a lower intensity commercial that might provide a transition to some heavier industrial that was buffered from the residential uses. And again, this petition, I guess in a way, is what they're trying to do with the buffer yards and things like that, and the potential C1 uses, although we know basically that's not the main purpose of the petition. It's to expand the industrial park and to provide for the school transportation facility. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
That was graduate level, and I'm still in high school. So I appreciate the description. I guess, and I had one other, then I don't know if this is the right. So if the school bus depot concept goes and it is built on 52nd Street with the setback from the street, are turn lanes, exit lanes, because in your staff report, one of your points is, if feasible, the 52nd Street driveway should include 2 exit lanes, 1 for left turns, 1 for right turns, to permit more spacing for queuing. Widening the road, is that something that is on the city of Lawrence to take care of, or is this being that it is a collector road, is this a city of Indianapolis responsibility, or?
It's a city of Lawrence responsibility. So, yeah, I mean, frankly, I was a little surprised that there was nothing in the traffic study that said there ought to be a minimal level of improvements to 52nd Street. It would seem that even with that sort of off-peak, you still would want, just as almost a standard, to have some type of, maybe not to the same extent you would in a different situation, but that you'd want to have some kind of passing blister or right turn lane, things like that would help accommodate traffic.
And I think Councilor Hall, it looks like the mayor would like to respond to your question since it's regarding the city of Lawrence.
To answer your question, to tell you that the city of Lawrence has already looked at this project. As we have done already in the past year, we have areas where we will actually widen the road. The most recent example is in front of the Metroplex and the Meyer Plastics, where we created another turn lane there when we saw the need for that. We're prepared to do the same.
Okay, any other counselors?
Madam President, Mr. Callaway, just for clarification, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, we have to refer to the attorneys. The current location for the bus garage on Thunderbird Road, and then, of course, this proposed location, I'd asked earlier, being a TIF location, are both properties in a TIF district, do you know, or?
No, I'm not aware of where the TIF districts in Lawrence are.
Yeah, I didn't know if you would know that or not. Okay, well, thank you.
Any other counselors? And I did have a question. This is regarding the Ameribridge. My understanding is the need to basically expand your footprint is that you're going to increase your manufacturing. You could just briefly speak to that.
That's fine. You want to come up? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so Ameribridge actually is part of its new equipment division. That's been the biggest part of its growth over the last 3 or 4 years. We're actually more of an assembly plant. We do a lot of subcontracted manufacturing throughout the state, throughout Fort Wayne, some areas around, and then those components are shipped in where we do the final assembly. So where you have a concept of manufacturing that we're taking raw steel and putting it all together and building these things up, that's a little misleading in manufacturing. We're more of a contract assembly, final assembly testing plant, along with our refurbishment that's been going on there for 25 years or so.
Okay, great.
Can I ask him a question?
Yes.
So to get this correct, they come in components and pieces, and you guys are assembling them. And then I'm assuming that this boneyard or junkyard or police, the people want to call it, it's just a place where you're storing scrap pieces where you're kind of
It's not necessarily scrap. Ameribridge started really its Lawrence work as a remanufacturer of equipment.
Right.
So we buy used equipment, bring it in, remanufacture it, and resell it all around the country. That developed then into the new manufacturing side, and that's really what's grown.
So that old stuff
So
out
our growth and the growth that we're projecting is in the new equipment side, the assembly side. We've kind of hit our peak in the remanufacturing side, and that's what pushed us into the new equipment side of sales over the last 3 or 4 years.
So you need a facility that's larger so that you can assemble or manufacture.
Yeah, so what would be in this concept would be a indoor inventory, office space, and then outdoor storage of our newly manufactured equipment before it ships.
So your newly manufactured equipment before it ships.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me that from the time that it's fully manufactured to when it ships. Give me an estimate.
Well, we try to manufacture them, have about a month of testing, Then we put them out on the road, ship them to whatever airport around the country needs them. Now, construction delays on airports drive our schedule often.
But these would be new units and not
New units,
old
correct.
units.
Correct, yes.
I did. So do you plan to expand the remanufacturing part of your business, or that's set?
The remanufacturing part's kind of peaked, so we're really trying to push our
New stuff.
new equipment side of things. Now, economy is always going to dictate what we're doing with equipment. When the economy's good, new equipment sales go up. When the economy's bad, remanufactured equipment sales go up. So we have to be somewhat flexible with that.
Any other questions?
Madam President, yes, I'd like to ask a question. So one of the concerns tonight was the appearance of your outdoor storage.
Right.
But looking at the site plan, because I'm guessing right now, is there no buffer at all?
There's nothing.
So looking at the site plan, it looks like a berm will be added, 8 feet high, vegetation on top of that, I'm hoping. So would that shield the neighborhood to the west?
Yeah, and kind of the concept, and I know there were a couple questions about why we don't have a building proposed and well, it's kind of hard to do that when you don't know what kind of zoning you're dealing with, and we're trying to move our plans to fall inside what is going to be approved. It's hard to develop a plan when you don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, obviously for us, full industrial, and we build a brand-new giant facility and go and keep hiring would be great. That's not going to work on this plan. So when they said we need to scale it back, we said, okay, how can we look at that? We'll look at it as maybe we'll do some offices, warehousing on this site. We'll use that building as kind of a buffer for our new equipment, keep our existing, where we have it. So, yeah, the whole concept, I think, is trying to, appease what that's going to look like. And yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to come up with a full detailed plan once we kind of know what parameters we're falling under.
My only other question is, how long have you been there?
I've been there over 25 years.
Thank you. What other counselors have questions for this gentleman?
It's Dustin Sloan.
And he signed in, so we have your address. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to,
Madam President, I have a question about process. Is there another time we can address Mayor?
yeah, we sure can. Let's go ahead, and there were 2 letters that were sent in to be read on the record, and so the clerk is going to read those at this time.
The first one is from Monarch Beverage. Please, Lawrence Common Council members, please consider this letter of support in consideration of the zoning change of the Poindexter property / Ameribridge location affecting 52nd Street in the northeast quadrant of Marion County. As a contributing member of the community, we recognize the important role the school system has in defining where businesses and families decide to live, work, and play. Metropolitan School District of Lawrence Township plays a critical role in the economic development of Lawrence. In order to attract and expand growth in our city, we believe allowing the school system to have the opportunity to take a more financially strategic approach in operating out of a central location is critical to managing the allocated funding they receive. For the reasons above, Monarch Beverage supports the efforts of Metropolitan School District of Lawrence Township as they seek a zoning variance to facilitate the 54 acres for their bus depot. This facility will greatly enhance the efficiency of their operations while attracting appealing future development in this area of our community. Sincerely, Mr. Phil Terry, CEO. The second letter is from the State of Indiana House of Representatives, John Bartlett. Dear Lawrence Common Council members, as I am unavailable to attend the upcoming zoning hearings in Lawrence, I wanted to take a moment to express my support for 2 rezoning petitions that are currently pending. In the first petition, MACLE Realty LLC is seeking rezoning of several parcels of real estate near Pendleton Pike and Cellar Street to provide for the development of a new corporate headquarters for Freegee Engineered Solutions Company. The second petition is from PGB Development LTD in the Lawrence Township School District. The school district proposes to relocate its bus transportation center to part of the parcel it plans to purchase at 10410 East 52nd Street, while Ameribridge plans to expand its existing business park on the remainder of that parcel to be leased from PGB. These are critical economic development opportunities for the Lawrence Trades District. These projects are exactly the kind we want to attract to and expand in Lawrence. They will create a high-quality business network that will promote education and growth within the city. It is also critical that we support the Lawrence Public Schools, which provide excellent education opportunities to our students and attract families to our community. I encourage you to offer your support of them as well as the council's recommendation to the Department of Metropolitan Development. Thank you, John Bartlett, Indiana State Representative, House District 95.
Okay, petitioner has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, and we appreciate the council's patience and diligence, questions, et cetera. I'm going to try to be under 5 minutes, which would be pretty amazing for a lawyer to keep short of a time limit, but I will try. I appreciate Mr. Callaway's comments for certain. We withdrew our other petitions because they really were not appropriately developed to achieve the desired outcome. MSD Lawrence is a sister governmental agency, much like you are, much like Larry's department is. We shouldn't be fighting over this. They have the same best interests that you do. You want to protect, preserve, and grow your community in a safe way that doesn't harm anybody. That's exactly the interest that MSD Lawrence has. Mr. Poindexter, on the other hand, is much the same on the private side. He has been part of this community for many, many years. There's an old saying that if you don't grow, you die, and that's really at the core of this. Do you want to have reasonable growth from a property that already has industrial use that is not likely to be residential? Just think about the residential expansion we've had for 7 or 8 years now. Nobody's come to Mr. Poindexter to develop this property residentially. Nobody. Could have been. It doesn't make sense. You do not want to foster commingling of residential traffic and commercial traffic sharing the same infrastructure. As to outside storage, and just to clarify for Ameribridge's use, they are an I-1 type use. They don't manufacture raw products. They're an assembler. That's permitted in I-1. Yes, they do have outdoor storage. That's what we built into our plan. We have adequate buffer yards, adequate berming, adequate screening, way, way beyond what CS requires to make this a palatable and safe development, not only from your perspective, but from the neighbor's perspective. I want to read one thing out of the traffic study, and this is in your tab 8. It should be noted that although the vacancy of the existing transportation center adjacent to the Thunderbird Road will result in fewer trips on the existing network, no volume reductions were applied in an effort to be conservative. Additionally, the bus peak hour trips were consolidated to 1 hour time periods when in reality ingress-egress of staff buses typically spreads out over a period longer than 1 hour. The proposed scenario, as summarized herein, therefore represents a worst-case scenario. We've tried to take the conservative route so that you don't feel that we're trying to pull anything over your eyes. All the intersections work at acceptable levels. We've got commitments, we've got our site plan, we've got our development plan, all of which provides you with the means to make a positive recommendation this evening, and we hope that you do. We really feel that we listened carefully to you last year and came back with a proposal that makes sense. We know that it's been kind of rocky along the way, and we hope that you don't feel that we've wasted your time. We really hope that you will listen to all the support that we've had. We appreciate the remonstrators' comments. We have the data-backed evidence of the record, and while we appreciate their comments, they're not based on data. Those are just their own personal observations. We will meet or beat every CS standard. We will meet every ordinance relating to noise, pollution. Anecdotally, there are no air control permits required for this type of facility. The only motor vehicles in the state that require any sort of air pollution control are in Lake and Porter counties. So there really is no extra thing that we have to do here other than comply with what we have to comply with anyway, should you choose this, to propose this. I'm going to leave one final thing as a handout. You're not an outlier in approving a transportation center. Here are several within Marion County that are located within sister townships on collector streets or areas or bus transportation centers that are embedded within or adjacent to or across the street from neighborhoods. Thank you for your time. We appreciate your support tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, remonstrators have 5 minutes for rebuttal, and I'm going to limit that to 1 minute per person. So that means, come on up. I did allow everyone to have additional time in the beginning, but I'm not going to be able to allow that now because it's 8 o'clock, and I know you all have places to be, and you don't want to spend the next hour here. Go ahead, sir.
again?
Yes, state your name and address for the record again.
Tim McDonald, 11607 Winding Wood Drive. My comments about the public safety are sort of based on personal experiences, but that's 40 years on the Indianapolis Fire Department and 20 years of that on the union board dealing with reallocation of firefighters, moving firefighters around, understanding how that all works. So my comments about this having a negative effect on public safety are based on experience and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Name and address for the record in 1 minute.
Joyce Irvin, 10626 Sedgegrass Drive, Winfield subdivision. The comments that I made are not based on something that I've proposed. This is real time. These are the real things that are happening. So while I appreciate the studies and the proposals and the times that they have brought this before the hearing, what we experience in our neighborhoods are real. The noise, the crime, all the things we experience are real. Several years ago, I was in this very same room when they wanted to build the strip mall in back of Sedgegrass Drive. And I was there to oppose that. And we were promised things. No, there'll be a fence high enough. No, it's not. The things that were proposed have not happened, and that's been many years ago, and there have been many issues. So I'm not talking about proposed issues. I'm talking about things that have happened and are still happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susie Dodds, and I live at 11704 Hamble Drive, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46235. I'm in the Winding Ridge development, and I don't have a handout, but while I was sitting back there, I pulled up just the Google area map of Ameribridge, and I'm going to limit my comment to this. I do support actually with the remonstrators in terms of the bus terminal and those concerns and traffic. I don't really have anything to add there, but when I pull up the picture of Ameribridge's current location, I mean, this isn't, anybody can pull this up on Google. I guess my question, it's basically a question that I have is, I've heard about what they would like to do as far as expanding their business and focusing on the new equipment, but my question is, this thing that very much looks like a boneyard, junkyard right there, I haven't really heard about anything that's going to happen to that. And if the majority of their business, as we heard in another meeting, is out on the west side, why is this here? And what is going to happen with all of that? Because as much as anything, that's my concern. That to me is the thing that I think it diminishes our community. So I'm pro-business, but this kind of thing doesn't seem very respectful of the community that it's in right now.
Thank you.
Excuse me, could you give me your name and address again? Because I don't see you on the sign-up sheet.
No, Suzie, Suzie, Dodds, D-O-D-D-S. And the address is 11704 Hamble Drive.
Hamble or Hamble?
Hamble, H-A-M-B-L-E, Drive.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danita Crickmore again. There's 17 acres in this plan that has not been designated to anything. So when I say I have a fear of what comes next, that's what I'm trying to address here. With the rezoning and all the things that were listed that could go in next door to me, I have no idea what's going to happen. The other thing is, I personally went to Traditions neighborhood and spoke to my neighbors, and out of probably 30 people I talked to, only one person said they was for having this development behind their house. And I know you're having to take my word for it, but I did get the petition signed where they did not want this. So that's all I have to say. I would like more clarification about this other 17 acres. I mean, if you rezone it, then what comes next? And that was my fear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any final comments
Madam President.
or questions from counselors?
Yes, Madam President, if I may. As I said earlier, this does fall into my council district, and I totally understand the need for the school to expand, and I fully understand the plight that they're running out of room. I'm still a little fuzzy on which location is in the TIF district, if if it's the new one proposed or if it's the old one. I think that makes a difference on property values, but it's been said that the traffic is not going to be during non-peak, or it will be during non-peak times. But if you live in this area and your scheduling is to go to work, come home from work during these peak time or these non-peak times, like I said, I have been trapped on Pendleton Pike, I guess, if you will, when the buses were moving into the school place right now where it's at on Thunderbird Road. I sat there for a long time. I didn't time it because I didn't really see any point. I know it was, it was like, wow, this is taking a long time. And, if a person is currently in a situation where they're going back and forth to work and to home, and they experience that twice a day, whereas now they're not, it's just smooth sailing and there's not really any traffic at all, that's going to be a real change of quality of life for people. And that's something that I'm truly concerned about.
Counselor Wells, if you could give it 30 seconds to wrap it up, I want to make sure all the other counselors can make comments.
Sure, thank you. And, but I've been to a lot of these kind of meetings, and this is by far the largest turnout I've ever seen. The Maria's list that she gave us in the petition, that's a lot of people, and I really would like to hope that this council doesn't discount that number of people that have shown up here and have also filled out the petition. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to see if any other counselors have comments to make. Counselor Hall?
Madam President, if I could, I had a question for Mayor Collier. You said earlier that that the city was willing to work on 52nd Street, and I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity. Is that
I get 1 minute.
Is it
Quickly, I could answer that question for you. Yes, we are prepared to do whatever widening we need to do to accommodate a new left turn lane when it's required. We've already done that, for an example, just earlier this year, just in front of the Crediplex and Myers when we had some new business going in. So we will prepare for that infrastructure repair. Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
This is only comments of council members. The remonstrators' time has already passed. I'm so sorry. Yes, Counselor Giles. Hopefully, someone will address your question through this process.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a statement, and I agree with Councilor Wells that I appreciate the turnout of our constituents coming in this matter, and I encourage you guys to come back and be a part of the process. I do want to make this, though, evident. I want to make this statement. Here in Lawrence, everything is connected. There was a constituent here that came up and talked about the crime in her area. We are very much aware, and the city's been working really hard to try to address some of the crime that comes in that Walmart area. Now, this is how it ties into this. Currently, right now, the land assessed is assessed at $62,000. We receive $1,254 a year. With this change, this property will be worth $3.8 million, $115,000 annually, as well as the TIF zone is the Thunderbird Road area, which is a high industrial area. Once the school district comes out of that, that will be worth $2.1 million, generating $63,000. We also have not talked about the taxes that would come off the improvement that Ameribridge is possibly proposing. As we look at trying to increase things for our firefighters, for our city workers, more services, more roads, more lights, all of those things come with a cost. And so I will be supporting this and supporting the school district, and I will be supporting this because I want to increase our tax rolls. We have limited opportunity, and I want to be able to do that so we can expand our services for all 55,000 citizens of Lawrence. Thank you.
Counselor Hall, did you have anything else? Counselor Chevlot? Counselor Parker?
Yes, I prepared a statement I'd like to read before we vote, if it's okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay. As many of you may know, I work for Lawrence Township Schools. From time to time, the school district may come before this council for various reasons. State law requires that any council member disclose when he or she has a conflict of interest. A public servant that has a financial interest in or receives an increase in income or profits from a city contract or purchase has a conflict of interest. As to this zoning matter involving the district's planned busing headquarters, I have no financial interest and thus no conflict of interest to disclose. In addition, this council is not the final determiner on this zoning matter, as our votes are recommendations only. The final decision rests with the city of Indianapolis as the zoning authority for all Marion County. As I do with every matter before this council, and because I do not believe that there is a conflict of interest, I will vote on this zoning request according to what I believe is in the best interest of the city of Lawrence as a whole. And because I believe that it is very important to be transparent about my decision to vote tonight, I'm sharing this decision with all of you.
Thank you, Counselor Parker. Counselor Jones, any comments or questions? Counselor Freeman? Okay. So thank you, everyone. Once again, I'm going to echo that. There are a lot of people here who are very passionate on both sides of the issue, and I respect and appreciate everyone's input and, comments in this process. I will tell you that historically, Lawrence has had a reputation of being a place that's difficult to do business with. We hear that from business owners. We hear that from people who come in to do work in our city. We've worked extremely hard as a council and with the administration over the past 4 years to, get rid of some of those barriers to doing business in our city. For me personally, I think it's very important that when very strong business partners, such as our school district, such as Poindexter and Ameribridge, want to continue to invest in our community by expanding their business, that speaks volumes to their commitment to our community. We have to make decisions up here. Myself specifically, I represent the whole city, not just a district. I need to make a decision that's in the best interest of the whole city. Our buses travel through all 6 districts. All of our kids ride on those buses every single day. So I do not take the decision lightly, and I looked at it from all perspectives, and I will be supporting this. I did want to take the time to tell you that I do appreciate you coming here tonight, because I think it's very important to be heard. Counselors, you have your ballot. Cast your votes.
Please print your name if you think I can't read your writing.
Are you Miss Bennett?
8 votes were cast, 6 to grant and 2 to deny. The petition's granted.
We're adjourned.